What up, YouTube? It's your boy JL, and this is part 2 of my blog about the debate between Cornel West and Michael Eric Dyson concerning the word nigga. And I'm going to start back off on reading quote 3 from Michael Eric Dyson, which goes as follows. Quote, "My pastor and others would say, referring to their congregation and their flocks, people who are highly learned, deeply erudite, profoundly scholarly, and who are able to understand both the folk and vernacular tradition on the one hand, and the formal and high-learned tradition on the other hand, said the word in an endearing fashion. So I grew up in a culture where nigga became a very visual expression of black self-regard and the refusal to allow white folk ultimately to determine what we think. I will say this, in Randy Kennedy's book on nigger, I have deep disagreement. I don't think that white folks or anybody else outside the community can appropriate that term and use it." Later on, he goes on to say, after stating his opinion against J-Lo's utilization of the word nigger, he goes on to say, quote, "My point is that you cannot appropriate the eternal meanings of that word, which of course acknowledges Professor West's point that once it escapes your own universal meaning, you cannot determine it anymore. But I think that's the risk of all great art. You can make it, but you can't determine how it gets interpreted." Unquote. So basically, he's saying that the fact that like highly educated black people who have some type of deep, profound understanding of the linguistic history will still use it among themselves anyway, in which you bear witness to, obviously, proves it somehow or in some type of way signifies a subconscious expression of brotherhood, and that it is inappropriate for any non-black persons to incorporate it into their ways of communication, pretty much. But at the same time, suggesting that it's equivalent to great art. So I'm going to go ahead and read my written response to that. Obviously, I disagree. Again, whether one is educated or not, today and yesterday's usage of it stems from habit and conditioning. But I would like to specifically answer his contention about liking the term nigga to great art, because I think the comparison is outrageous and absurd. The word art, according to the Oxford American Dictionary, means the expression of creative skill in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, or creative activities such as painting, music, and drama. The origin and application of the term nigga does not fit into such category as art. This is yet another manipulative attempt to justify the social ubiquity of its application. Last point that I want to read. Point number 4. Or quote number 4. Quote, "Even the way the word was vocalized and articulated suggested a deep and intimate connection amongst black people who were webbed together by common history. And once you begin to intervene on that history by using different forms of the word, you lose the specific meaning of the context. So I acknowledge that it's problematic, but I don't think it's so problematic that we have to give up the use." Then he goes on to say, "In my book on Martin Luther King Jr., with the chapter where he calls Andrew Young his nigga, 'Nigga, where have you been all day?' the day before he died. That kind of terminological intimacy speaks a kind of communion among, albeit highly enlightened black people who understand the use of that term. Then we have to elevate black people to that level." So from my understanding, pretty much he's saying that like the N-word, the way the N-word is enunciated is somehow like another signifier of unity. You know what I'm saying? And that and that particular point is validated or proved by the fact that Martin Luther King also used the word when he referred to Andrew Young, as he mentioned, like I said, while admitting at the same time that if you kind of like change or have modifications to the form of the word, and in the long run it can have some type of you can run into some type of issue, but not completely, not big enough to completely retire the word. You know what I'm saying? So my point that I wrote to that is this. Not to sound redundant, but again, his arguments are extremely persuasive and eloquent, but lacking in sound in sound logic. For example, his point about Martin Luther King referring to Andrew Young as nigger the night before he died, somehow suggesting a kind of terminological intimacy and communion among highly enlightened black people, is off base and reflects a large degree of historical embellishment. As I've mentioned earlier, the term was internalized during and after slavery by subsequent generations and gradually evolved to reference a fellow black person without regard to inferiority or brotherhood. He could have used any other synonym, but due to habit, he chose that word. Again, not out of some intimate connection, but out of conditioning. Another illustration Michael Eric Dyson uses to make his point is how the N-word is enunciated by most black people today. The implication being that nigger signifies endearment, while nigger is malicious. However, it takes simple analysis to do away with this misconception. Linguistically and historically, the majority of African Americans do not pronounce the ER at the end of most words in the English language. For instance, instead of pronouncing motherfucker, we say, in general, motherfucker. Instead of hamburger, we say hamburger. And nigger and nigga is not exempt from that classification. So basically, those are all of the points that he made. And again, I thought it was a pretty interesting back and forth. I think Cornel West did a fairly decent job, but again, he was really, he had the high ground, you know what I'm saying, as far as being closer to the truth. But again, he was just like too fucking passive and shit, you know what I'm saying, which is cool. I guess that's just his style. He is sort of laid back. But like I said, Michael Eric Dyson, I give the man props. I ain't never a hater. I mean, he basically overshadowed him. You know what I mean? But still educational in the long run. I think that's something that a lot of people should check out. You know what I mean? Because it's thought provoking. But I guess that's it for this blog. Y'all. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. You know what I mean? Got y'all wheels rolling and all that. But I'm gonna go ahead and be out. Y'all have a good night.